I guess we can just jump in and get started. Unless we want to give everyone maybe 15 seconds to sign on to the link. I guess we can just jump in and get started.
Cool.
Unless we want to give everyone maybe sign on to the 15 seconds to sign on to the link. Oh, okay. We got a loop coming in from Chris's side. But welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us in our ongoing Thursday series of local state house races, state school board races, and county council races that we're covering on behalf of the Salt Lake County GOP. My name is Mackie Smith. I serve on the county's executive board and also am the state chair for Utah Young Republicans. And I am privileged to be here alongside Marcy Hausman. And we are just grateful to be able to cover again House District 41. You'll notice that we have a couple of familiar faces from a debate we hosted a few weeks ago. That was one where we had multiple debates going simultaneously. So now we're having the opportunity to do a 30-minute debate between Steve Aste and Gary Sandberg for House District 41. For those that are waiting for a couple of our other debates for House District 45 and 46, we're going to be doing each of those in order, each 30 minutes. So don't sign off once one debate's done because we have another one coming right up. So without further ado and just jumping right in, we're going to start with opening statements for Steve. I guess just to set the stage with you all, each of the candidates have been shared the question topics ahead of time and had input into what those question topics were as well. So first off, you'll have 2 minutes for opening statements. Steve, the time is yours.
My website, video, and handouts all point to election integrity as the cornerstone of my campaign. Without it, we're destined to be ruled by cheats and tyrants. My website initially included a photo of Mike Lee and I decided the message could be mistaken as an endorsement, so I removed it. Mr. Sandberg relies on endorsements to promote his campaign. I counted as many as 49 endorsements. Many cite integrity and core values. On June 7th, ballots had been received. On June 7th, it was brought to my attention that a delegate from our district was listed on Mr. Sandberg's website, endorsing him. The delegate was not endorsing him. This delegate voted for me at convention, actively supports my campaign, and has a campaign sign in their yard. This delegate is a person of prominence and was put in a difficult position. That night, June 7th, I met with Mr. Sandberg in his home. He assured me that the delegate issue was a mistake. He gave me his word that he would correct the problem immediately. During the following 8-day period, several requests were made by the delegate to remove the endorsement. Yet it remained, even while other changes were made to the Sandberg website during the 8-day period. 20 to 25% of people vote within 48 hours of receiving their ballots. How many people voted for Mr. Sandberg due to the willful disregard to the delegate's request to remove this endorsement? Mr. Sandberg, you are the very reason that I've chosen to run for office. There are many millions of people just like me that have all but lost hope and confidence in the election system and our government. I have pledged to root out and expose cheating and fraud wherever I find it. You were given the opportunity to make this right. You did not, so I may as well start with you.
Gary, your opening statements.
Well, I was going to start by congratulating and complimenting Mr. Aste on the upfront and positive and well fought battle that's been going on in our campaign until now. Now, I think what you're doing is taking a specific set of circumstances out of context. Number one, at the precinct vote, that individual that you mentioned committed to the precinct chair that she would endorse me. So when you came to my home, and you brought that issue up, and I brought up the issue of your standing with Mike Lee as a form of endorsement. My campaign web manager was notified the very day that that you met with him, you came that night, so he was notified the next day. And the web manager happened to be in was it Texas, New Mexico, with his 99-year-old mother who was dying, and she passed away subsequently. I talked with him this morning, and if you check the website, you'll find that he immediately changed that, corrected it as soon as he got through with taking care of his family, absolutely pressing issue with his 99-year-old mother. So I very much reject your intimation that I am in any way, this was a corrupt thing. This was a matter of, and if it didn't happen the day before, which I did not commit, or excuse me, the day after, I did not commit it. I told you I would focus on it, which I did. And as soon as we could get it changed, we did.
Gary, for our next question, and Gary, we're going to stay with you. What experience have you had in public service, either in the military, community service, or volunteer service organizations that you feel qualifies you to serve in the state legislature?
Thank you. My experience goes back to the late 60s, early 70s in terms of public service. I served for 8.5 years as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Army National Guard. And I enjoyed that service immensely. I was trained to interrogate prisoners of war. I think I mentioned this at our last debate. And subsequent to that, I have spent my life working with chambers of commerce in South Salt Lake and the South Salt Lake. I'm an honorary colonel in their South Salt Lake police force. And I spent 4.5 years as a volunteer at Decker Lake Juvenile Corrections. So I've had an opportunity to work with both sides of the equation, those who have been disenfranchised due to their circumstances, but still need to be attended to, and their needs have to be addressed. And I attempted in a 4.5 year period to reach out to many, many hundreds. If you check that out, Decker Lake has 3 pods of 40 individual basically they're interns. I mean, they're young people who are under serious, they've committed serious offenses. But I had an opportunity to work with them, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you, Gary. Steve, same question for you on your service background.
Just to finish up on the last statement I made, there were other changes made during that 8-day period on that website, and no changes were made on the endorsement issue. It was a few days after the changes were made, having to do with fire and some other additions to his newsletter, and yet the endorsement change didn't come until yesterday. So anyway, we'll move on. I've had extensive experience in service. It started very young when I was 21 years old, when I became a big brother with big brothers and big sisters. I was at the time one of the youngest people that they allowed to do this, as they generally look for more mature, older people to mentor younger kids. I developed a very good relationship with a Hispanic young man of about 12 years old at the time. And every week we'd go out and do different activities, and I would mentor him and teach him about things of life and so forth, and had a very good relationship with him for many, many years. I've served through my church in many capacities, as well as, and most importantly, probably, going out and working on old people's homes, painting their houses, fixing their yards, etc. I've had experience with holding out help, an organization that helps polygamy families get out of polygamy. It teaches them, puts them in school. It houses them and teaches them life skills that they have not learned while they're in the polygamy homes. Gets them out of sexual abuse situations. And I continue to work with that organization.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, staying with you, perhaps no topic in Utah, and more specifically Salt Lake County, is brought up more frequently than growth and the growing pains related to that population growth. What policies do you support to address these growing pains we are experiencing, namely in transportation, infrastructure, and housing?
Okay, housing's out of control as far as the pricing goes right now, both to purchase a home and to lease a home. It's next to impossible for any young child or young adult to purchase a home at the exorbitant prices that they are now. I personally believe that these prices will come down eventually. A bubble will burst, as historically has been the case. But we need to build more multifamily dwelling units in the proper locations, not in suburban cities, but in the downtown urban locations, not in the suburbs. We need to continue to upgrade our major highways, to include I-15, I-215, and of course, there's issues with transportation in the canyons. And I believe that UDOT's actually already had a vote on that as far as what they're going to do with the gondola, et cetera. And that's kind of a done deal from what I understand. I've talked to some city people about that. I'm not prepared to divulge their names, but I believe a vote has already happened with respect to that, because I know that that's a big issue here in the Cottonwood Heights area. That, and we need to keep up with our water systems. It needs to be upgraded. It needs to be, it's really old in many locations, and we need to put the money into upgrading all of those systems, the sewage and the water systems.
Thank you, Steve. Gary, same questions on what you would do to address our growing pains relating to transportation, infrastructure, and housing.
Well, with regard to my qualifications in that, I spent 4 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission in South Salt Lake. I did not mention that earlier, but the legislature is responsible to oversee these types of systems. Like, for example, they fund UDOT, and they are responsible for making certain that our growth is within the bounds that we can afford as a taxpayers, and that we are also not outgrowing the essential services that we have to sustain life. We need water, we need fire protection, we need sewage, as was mentioned, but all of those things growth will come to an end if we run out of water. Growth will come to an end if we end up having horrible fire problems, wildfire problems, like have happened in Colorado, and it comes to a terrible end. So I believe that the common sense approach is that we need to make certain that our growth does not outpace the essential services that we have to provide for it. And regardless of these UDOT decisions, it doesn't happen if that decision has already been made, as Steve intimates. That doesn't happen unless the legislature agrees to vote for it. So I think that that's still a decision that has to be before the legislature and the vote of the people. And I, for one, would like to see more common sense brought to how that is handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. As a reminder to our viewers, before I ask the next question, you can submit your own questions in the chat below. And if we have time, we're definitely going to be able to ask those to our two candidates and our candidates throughout the night. So just keep that in mind, viewers. Okay, the next question that also relates on statewide discussions In addition to growth, election integrity has been a hot topic that's heavily discussed these last 2 years. What are your ideas or thoughts concerning improving election integrity in Utah? As a member of the Utah State Legislature, do you feel that our election laws are in a good place, or do you feel that they need to be adjusted? Gary, I'm going to start with you.
I think that this is something that needs to be continually overseen. You can't say one and done. It's not an event, it's a process. And the process has to go on generation by generation. I believe that the Gowd report was fairly exhaustive and brought out some good points, some of which are stated with regard to chain of custody of the ballots. The big issue, of course, is how do we make sure that mail-in voting is done and it's done properly. And I personally believe that we need more scrutiny as to who is actually voting, but with that to mail-in vote. Do they have a driver's license? Are they truly the person that is making out that vote? And I think there are ways that we could do that, like I mentioned, a driver's license or some other form of ID. I believe that the list that Gowd put out is something that needs to be watched and followed carefully. And if we do so, I think chain of custody, ID, making sure that the records and the counting processes in balance. However, I reject the idea that Utah's vote in the last election was tainted to the point that we can't have confidence in it. Personally, I think that it's easy to throw the baby out with the bath, and I don't think that makes sense. I think we can improve what we do, but we should not do something that damages us. We can do more damage than good if we go too far.
Steve, your response on election integrity?
I would say based on that response that Mr. Sandberg did not read Gowd's report because it does indicate massive irregularities in our voting system. The voting records have not been kept up to date. More registered people voted than there are actually registered voters. If you read the report, you will see that. Our legislature had the opportunity to pass House Bill 371 in this last legislative session. They failed to do so. That legislation called for showing ID and monitoring ballot boxes with cameras. They shot that down. Those two simple things, and they couldn't even get that done. There is fraud here in Utah. It's larger than people think. The records that are being asked for by citizens to review the voting are being denied by the Lieutenant Governor's office. In fact, she is threatening certain county clerks if they put forth that information. There is voter fraud here. Anybody that can't see it has their head in the sand. It's the number one issue that needs to be addressed, because if we do not have election integrity, we have nothing in this country. We will be ruled by people that have illegitimately gained office, and that cannot happen. This is not how our forefathers intended it. It must be stopped. It must be stopped now. And the problems that happened in 2020 need to be resolved, and those that cheated need to be held accountable for it.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, coming back to you, what specific bills or legislation do you feel should be passed in Utah to protect Utah families? This was a topic that was brought up frequently in the last year, both through the pandemic and because of recent social issues that are brought to the forefront. So what are your policies in further protecting Utah families?
Well, the first thing I would do is get all the crap out of the schools. The schools have no place in teaching gender identity, social indoctrination of any sort, which they do, not all do, but many do. It's kind of a roll of the dice, which teacher you're going to get, which principal you're going to get as to what they teach in that particular classroom. I've seen video of principals in West Jordan promoting transgenderism and identity change. This has got to stop. We need to get, this is a parental family issue. If we have government and schools dictating the morality of our children, that is one of the major problems with our families at its core. I would put forth legislation that prohibited that kind of indoctrination in our schools to start. I would encourage in all aspects to put God back in government and in the school system where he has been taken out of for so many years. Benjamin Franklin said that the Constitution is worth nothing in a country that has no morals or religious values. And that's where we've come today. We need to get back to our core values as a Christian, Judeo-Christian society, and we need to get the government out of indoctrinating our children and promote the family in that way.
Thanks, Steve. Gary, same question for you on protecting Utah families.
I think that Steve makes very good points. I wanted to say that the point that Steve brought out about that in election integrity, that it is horrible. I mean, it has to be corrected immediately. He never heard me say that it's perfect, and I basically reject his statement to try and put those words in my mouth. I never said it was perfect, and I at the beginning I said that it needs to be worked on ongoing, and the same thing goes with our public schools. I know many teachers, and there are teachers and principals, and my wife was a public school teacher, and those people do hard work, and they need to be celebrated, and they need to be honored, and tearing them down and painting them all with the same brush does not serve our family value state and our family value system. Personally, I totally agree that God needs to be reinjected into the classroom. I believe that our moral opinions need to be emphasized, but I don't believe that we again throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there are many individuals in this state educating our people, our kids, and I also believe that education needs to extend beyond just what we're preparing to go to college. We need to have vocational education to train our plumbers, electricians, woodworkers, etc., so that the homes that we're building can be more cost effective.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, in our last section, we're going to shorten the time and ask a couple more speed round questions and give you each a minute to respond. So the first one we're going to talk about, the county earlier this year, county council was able to overturn, or the legislature, excuse me, was able to overturn the county council's mask mandate that was passed regarding COVID. Now that we're leaving the pandemic era, what role do you see the state legislature playing in any future public health crises?
Am I to go first?
Oh,
Sorry.
Gary's going to go first on this one, Steve.
I believe that in fact, I stood up and applauded when that vote was taken in the legislature to overturn that mandate and continue that horrible. I think taking of our rights and individual rights. I believe that we are better judges of how we should conduct ourselves if we are involved in raising families. I think we can take better care of our families than the government, and they ought to get out of it.
Steve, your thoughts?
Well, as I've gone on the record before saying, the government has zero business in our health affairs. Zero. They've ruined companies, they ruined families, they ruined lives, suicide shot through the roof with these mandates. Government messes things up, and it's true with healthcare and so many other issues. I too was very happy to see the legislature overturn that mandate, as I was very happy to see them overturn the transgender veto. The government has zero, let me make myself clear, zero to do with our healthcare, period.
Thank you. Another speed round question, 1 minute. Steve, we're going to start with you on a question that was submitted regarding ESG for our listeners or our viewers. This is something that State Treasurer Marlo Oaks has spoken at length on, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, which are essentially social principles which investors are using and applying as they dish out credit and investment to companies. So Steve, your thoughts on ESG, and if this policy is implemented in our state, how best should representatives manage or respond to it?
Wow, ESG, economic social governance. Listen to that word. That was started at the G7 summit, I believe, in 2021. It is just another attempt for world control, world governmental control. If you look at that, it's like a FICO score. You need a certain score to get a loan for a home and a better interest rate for a home. Well, this organization pushing the ESG mandate wants to put a score on how you do environmentally, whether you believe in climate change, whether you believe in transgenderism, whether you believe in all kinds of social indoctrination to score you, which is going to eventually lead to you not being able to get a loan based on your views and what kind of car you drive.
Gary, your thoughts?
It has no place in our society.
Gary, your thoughts?
Well, ESG, if this is another way to usurp our God-given rights and our constitutional rights, is a travesty that we should avoid at all costs. There are some states, and I think Utah should possibly be, or should be one of them, that refuse to accept that kind of mandate within the state. I think that, again, we make better decisions at the local level than if it's done in The Hague or wherever the body that meets and starts handing out these edicts. It's ridiculous on its face.
Thank you. And for our closing statements, first off, thank you both so much for attending. For our viewers, make sure to stay on as we jump to House District 45. But you each will have a minute for closing statements. Steve, we're going to have you start, followed by Gary.
I meant no disrespect to your team member's ill family member. I absolutely wish her well. I'll pray for her. However, my premise stands. There were changes made to this website that added additional things, but did not remove this endorsement a couple of days before. So if this ill person son could make those changes, he could certainly have taken off the endorsement. Those endorsements cost votes. You may as well have walked up and put ballots into the ballot box. It's tantamount to the same thing. It's stealing votes. And that's how I feel about it, and it's not right. You've put this person in a very compromising position, one that she did not need to be in. And I feel for her, but it must be known what has happened.
Gary.
Well, Steve, if you feel like that was the deciding factor in our campaign, then I think that we have a difference of opinion on that. I personally, Steve, I would like to find areas on which we agree. And so far this evening, it seems like, and I appreciated your willingness to come over and knock on my door at 8 o'clock at night And now it seems to me it was a ploy to try and put together an ambush so you can bring this up. The next day, talked to my team, absolutely the next day, and said, would you please get this taken care of? I don't handle the website. And if you want to continue to harp on that issue, if that's your biggest issue, I think that we've got really way more important things to talk about than that. And I feel badly that that's what your feeling is, and what you're saying is that's how how you steal an election. I don't think that's it.
Thank you both so much for joining in again. As a reminder to our viewers, the election is Tuesday, June 28th. That's the last day you can either mail in your ballot if you received a mail-in ballot, or vote in person. So again, thank you both, Gary and Steve, and best of luck in the home stretch of the race.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So this is the part where we have our technical transition, where they log off and we have our next two candidates log on. So the next race we're jumping to is House District 45. Man, I wish, Marcy, I wish you and I could do almost like an ESPN analyst, like, oh, how did you feel that one went? You know?
What was your take?
Yeah, but for our viewers who are
We are
jumping
neutral.
yeah, exactly. For our viewers who are jumping in, my name is Mackie Smith. This is Marcy Hausman. Marcy serves on the Sandy City Council. I serve as our state chair for Utah Young Republicans. And we're really pleased to be able to host this 30-minute debate on House District 45 with Richard Cunningham and Susan Pulsipher. Thank you both so much for joining in, and we're going to get started. These questions were submitted ahead of time, and we'll cover a range of issues, both local and then a couple smaller lightning round questions at the end relating to more national trends. So we're going to have Richard start first. Richard, if you're able to adjust the camera, it has you on your side.
That better?
Yes.
All right. So appreciate it. I'm in the mountains at a conference with a big group, and I'll let you see we're at the lake. How's that? So you guys can see that. Enjoying the great outdoors and Wi-Fi. But appreciate, I do go by Rich and not Richard. I was always in trouble when I ran when I was named Richard. So, but appreciate you inviting me part of this. I'm sorry I couldn't make the June 2nd one. We had an unexpected death in the family and was out of town, but I appreciate that. But excited to be here. I've lived in South Jordan South Jordan, West Jordan for the last 30 years. Married, have 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and excited to be part of Utah politics again. So I think go ahead. I mean, we can kind of go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Susan, your opening statements.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. It's always been important to me to serve my community. When David and my 4 daughters were young, I helped in the classroom and in schools, and I was often asked to serve on district and regional committees. Parents frequently called me when they had concerns, and I helped them find their solutions. I've always been something like a parent advocate. Prior to serving in the House of Representatives, I served on Jordan School Board and as president. During this service, I pushed hard to increase parental involvement. We rearranged our agenda and held monthly meetings to give parents an increased voice. We brought groups of citizens together to help make decisions, and we reduced construction costs because of it by 17%. Think about that. That's like buy 5, get 1 free sale. That is, and we also created efficiencies and reprioritized funding to build 2 schools using existing funds. Both of these efforts saved the taxpayer millions of dollars. Now, during my time in the House, one of my top priorities has been making sure that we keep government efficient and so you can keep more of your hard-earned money. In addition to cutting income taxes by 15%, increasing the dependent exemption, and eliminating the tax on military retirement, I've been fighting hard to eliminate the state tax on Social Security. And then protecting families has also been a priority, and I've passed several bills to increase the fight against the exposure for kids of pornography on mobile devices, and to increase vaping. 9 states are following my lead. And I passed a bill to foster private sector solutions. We have to realize that government is not the solution. It's usually the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We're going to start back up with you, Susan. You'll have 2 minutes to answer this question. Perhaps no topic in Utah, and more specifically Salt Lake County, is brought up more frequently than growth and growing pains. I see it probably on every political website for a candidate's website in Utah these days. What policies do you support to address these growing pains, specifically in terms of transportation, housing, and infrastructure?
Well, growth is a huge problem in Utah. I mean, we love the people that are coming in. We love our families that want to live here, but it's difficult sometimes to provide for those needs. Now, transportation, I've been really happy because the last 2 years, the legislature has been able to use some of the COVID funds and some of the extra one-time dollars we had to speed up building, especially on the west side. And even in Sandy, we were able to fund a road that was needed in Sandy. And I have been really excited that we were able to do that. As far as growth in general, I think I would like to see us really incentivize in economic development in rural Utah. I just read like yesterday about a business that was shutting down in rural Utah. And we need to try to increase our economic development in rural Utah so we can get people can move there, and they need it. And we don't need all of our growth on the Wasatch Front. So I would like to continue to look at ways to do that. And as far as, water and housing and so on, we are looking closely in the legislature in the last couple of years at ways to help with those, because those are very important issues. We've made some small progress. We need to continue.
Thanks, Susan. Rich, you have 2 minutes on growing pains, specifically transportation, infrastructure, and housing.
Okay, great. When I served in the legislature, I sat on revenue and tax. I also sat on transportation committee. Myself and Senator Osmond, we were there, secured the major funding that we needed to finish all of the growth around the district, getting rid of the old stupid football that was in there, and took care of getting the 114th and then prioritizing, the funding for 98th and 126th. So I understand the transportation. I understand the housing challenges that we run into. Yes, we have water challenges, but I believe that the legislature is poised because of the leadership that we have. I mean, I wish we had more rain in the lake that I am, behind right now. But when I look at housing and growth, I came from rural Utah. I know what rural Utah is going through, and they're growing pains as well. But the priorities need to be making sure that we have a qualified workforce through education, through career technical education, through the trades, because the only way we are going to continue to attract, to make Utah one of the greatest states that we have, is by making sure that we have an educated workforce through the trades. We can bring all of the technical jobs that we want here, but we need welders, we need plumbers, we need electricians, concrete, and the housing. I spent some time with the mayor of White City that came into the ADUs, and they are really upset about what the legislature was doing and proposed to be able to, with the ADUs, taking away some of the rights. And we need to let the local cities have more local control and more help with what they are doing in their growth. They know it better than the legislature, and we need to get out of the way of most local growth and help them with the funding through state tax dollars to make sure that they're prioritized to get where they need to be. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Comes in clear. Thanks, Rich.
Okay.
Rich, we're going to stay with you on this next question.
Okay.
It's regarding the topic of protecting Utah families. given both the pandemic and a lot of social issues that are being discussed on a national and state and local level, what policies do you support and would like to pass that would help protect Utah families?
Well, I will tell you, when I was in the legislature, I helped and was the House sponsor for the parental rights control in schools. It gave the parents the choice. We have tested our kids. The teachers are at their breaking limit with what they're doing, but we did major legislation to give parents choice in education, choice in what they were going to, if they wanted their kids to opt out of exams because of what's going on. We have this, the critical race theory. We have the mask mandates. And I am so glad that our legislature bipartisanly, stood up, passed the bill, but yet my opponent, decided that a conference call to be on a national basis was more important than taking a vote for personal choice, personal freedom, because I believed in our personal choice, our personal liberties, our personal freedoms. And a vote that was so important when it came to mask mandates, we did not have the representation that we needed. I'll go from there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rich. Susan, your response.
Thank you. During my time in the legislature, I have sponsored bills that looked at underage vaping, and these are protecting Utah families and keeping them safe. Also, I passed a couple of bills on pornography and child device filter bill, and that bill has gone on to other states. It's being now replicated in other states. I passed a bill this year that helped Utah families, and it was the childcare, and it's keeping childcare in the private sector. And I'd love to talk more about that maybe in another question, but I do want to my opponent's suggestion that I wasn't available to respond to. First of all, I voted against mandate 3K in my votes in the House this year. Secondly, I was asked by the speaker to attend this session and to represent Utah. Now, I had spoken to him. I knew what was the probable outcome of that vote, and I knew what my constituents wanted. And because this was an electronic Zoom meeting, I was actually on the Capitol complex. And if that vote had been close, or they had needed to, they could have done a call of the House and I could have come right over and voted. But we pretty much knew that wasn't needed. And he said, yes, go ahead, do your meeting that he had asked me to do. So I was representing my constituents, and I was there. I have done many pieces of legislation in terms of families. This year, I did a solicitation bill to try to reduce traffic. Very important in our families.
Susan, we're having some technical difficulties on your end.
Okay.
Maybe turning off the video just for a sec might help,
Okay.
because it's a frozen screen anyway, unfortunately.
Oh no. Let's see.
Okay, it's coming in a little bit better now.
Oh.
And there it goes again. I'm sorry to
Oh, dear.
interrupt.
Oh, I'm so sorry too. Stop video. Now I'll start it. Okay. We'll
Typically
start
stopping the
again.
video can help with your streaming.
Okay, is that better? Is that better?
Starting to.
Okay.
No worries. We don't have
Okay.
tens of thousands of people watching, so you're okay.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I can't see anything wrong on my end, so
Audio is coming in a lot clearer now when you turn off the video.
okay. Awesome.
Take another 30 seconds though to complete your thought.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. Let's see if it will do what it's supposed to do here. Okay, anyway, I have passed a lot of legislation targeted at protecting families, including this last year. I passed legislation to look at sex trafficking, which is a big problem, and that helps families. And again, education. many bills to pass education to help our kids get a high quality education and to help parents be more involved. And in the future, I really want to help parents have a greater voice, just like I did on the school board.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Susan, we're going to stay with you on this next question. And this will be one of our 1 minute more lightning round questions. So it's on election integrity. This is a hot topic that's been discussed since the 2020 presidential election. From in your perspective, where do you feel election integrity laws are in the state of Utah? Are they strong enough? Do they need to be adjusted? And what changes, if you think it needs to be adjusted, would you support?
I don't think election integrity is ever done. I think that it is crucial for our form of government. It's crucial for our republic to keep us functioning the way we should. I think this last year we passed several bills aimed at increasing our integrity. One of them was to can get the people who are deceased off the voter rolls as soon as it happens, so they're not receiving ballots. And there's many things that we need to do. I have a couple of people helping me with doing research on this topic, and I think there's a lot of great ideas, and we need to keep looking at it and keep working on it.
Thanks, Susan. Rich, your thoughts?
You know, I look at that and I hear about it all the time, but let me tell you, I've got full faith and confidence in our elections. You know, I think it's vital, and I applaud the recent legislation and, you know, welcome other ideas to improve the security. One of the big ones, I believe, is the county clerk and our state election office know exactly how many voters are into each precinct. And there are voters that are being withheld in certain categories, and at least give us a raw count of eligible voters, you know, in each precinct, and the numbers, you know, and the return ballots, including those that are being withheld. And so I think that would help our confidence that's out there. You know, I am not one that, you know, in Utah, we've done such a great job. We've led the league, you know, led the nation in vote by mail, but given opportunities, if you want to vote early and go do it there, yes. But I believe that people need to be citizens of the United States. They need to be here. You know, their signatures needs to match. You know, we just can't continue to let, on a national basis, some of the craziness that's gone out there that I see. But we're doing a great job, but we do need some other tweaks in there with our county clerk and our state election office to give us more raw data that would be very, very helpful.
Thanks, Rich. Rich,
Yep.
We're going to stay with you on another divisive topic that we've seen in recent years. We know that the Salt Lake County Council at the beginning of this year passed a mask mandate, and that the state legislature then voted to overturn it. Now, while we are transitioning in a post-pandemic society, what role do you see the state legislature playing in future public health crises should they emerge? And this will be a 2-minute question.
You know, when I you know, first of all, I've been very lucky because my brother was the director of the health department for Southeastern Utah, and his specialty was epidemiology. And you know what? So I had many, many conversations with him about right and wrong. And I believe in the next few years, as we get more and more data, what they did nationally, what especially happened nationally and locally with these mass mandates and locking down our kids. You know, my wife has worked for the last 14 years in the Murray School District. She would come home and see what was happening to these kids with masks in the schools. And yes, it is about personal choice and personal freedom. You want to wear a mask today, that is fantastic. But we don't need a health department. I think the bill, when the legislature, and if I'm not mistaken, was SB 195, did the correct thing in overturning, you know, the mask mandate, you know, in Salt Lake County. And when you look at the individual that went from the governor's office down to the local level in Salt Lake County, she wanted to shut down the entire state like we are in California. I'm glad with what we've done. I just continue to see that this is not going to go away because a controlling body on the other side, not the Republican side, the Democratic side, they want so much to control our lives, our personal freedoms. And yes, was I against the mandates? And you know what? I emailed my current representative, you know, that we're speaking with tonight. I told her I was against the mask mandates. I know many people. I would like to see the actual numbers of how many people, because everybody I talk to, 9 out of 10 of the people I talked to in House District 50 and the new House District 45 were against against mask mandates. I believe our legislature on a bipartisan vote did the correct thing when it came to the mask mandates.
Thank you, Rich. Susan, your
Bet.
thoughts?
Thank you. You know what? As I mentioned before, I've consistently voted against mandates. And, you know, counties and cities are political subdivisions of the state. And so the state has authority to reverse the decisions that they make. In this case, we had a process. And to Rich's question, you know, I had hundreds of people reach out to me through email, through phone calls, through text, also on a survey I sent out about the issue of whether or not the legislature should override this particular mandate. And I thought it was interesting because he's asking me how many. 60 to 70% of my constituents, and this is hundreds, ask me to not override the mask mandate. And the thing that I thought was fascinating, it is not because they wanted masks. It is not because they even agreed with the mandate, but what they didn't want, what they wanted is for the process to play out, and they wanted Salt Lake County to make that decision. And so I'm just reporting what my constituents responded to in regards to whether or not the state should have done that. And in my case, in District 50 and 45, we had people, both Sandy and South Jordan, responding. We had between 60 and 70% that said, don't override it.
Any other thoughts, Susan, on future public health crises?
You know what? I really like it when the legislature, like we did this in this case, prescribes policy so that everybody knows how we're going to do it up front. And I do think elected officials ought to be making the decisions. Absolutely. I don't think an unelected official should make a decision. And that's why I actually did like it that the counties and the legislature had the last say, because I think that's important.
Yeah. And Rich, let me give you an additional 30 seconds to talk on what you feel the government should do moving forward regarding public health, similar to what I asked Susan.
Well, I think we need to have the right people involved. I think we had too many opinions, especially on a national level, weighing into it. I mean, like I said, when I have a brother that's, has his master's in nursing and the director of the health department, for Southeastern Utah, I think I got a pretty good authority of somebody that was dealing with not only that crisis, and it's going to morph into something else. And I want to mention one thing. That survey that my opponent is talking about came to us 2 to 3 weeks into the session when the vote was the first week of the session on mask mandates. So it was cruel. We were doing it when that was happening. So you know what? Now it could be monkeypox. It could be the next one. I mean, how many different variations have we had of now, COVID-19?
Mhm.
And it's not going to go away. It's just the symptoms are less. We're adapting. The herd mentality, those things are changing.
Thanks, Rich.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Couple lightning round questions following up. So one, I've talked about a couple of hotly contested issues, and based on the way our media portrays it, we feel very divided as a society. What are your thoughts, or what would you do to help heal political subdivisions that we have specifically here in Utah and in Salt Lake County? Rich, I'll start with you.
I will tell you, that was one of the great things that I've been able to do my entire career, is be a kind of a middleman negotiator. I worked with the Ute Conference League for almost 8 years. And I've got to tell you, dealing with the legislature is much easier than dealing with 1,000 parents that thought their kid needed to be the starting quarterback, because they're not all gifted. But you know what? We have got to work better. And even in the legislature, 90% of the bills we all agree on. It's just though that 10% that the Democrats and the Republicans disagree on in the state level. Of course, the federal level, it's everything. It doesn't matter. But on a state level, let me tell you what, I believe we have done a great job. I have been in public service and dealing with clients for 37 years as a business owner, not just nationwide, but nationally. I know how to negotiate. I know how to deal with people across the aisles, because you know what? You've got to have people on both sides of the aisle to accomplish worth things that need to finish.
Thank you, Rich.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for being cool with me being a time clock enforcer.
You got it.
Susan, a minute for you on healing political subdivisions.
Thank you. You know, I had the experience of working together with people, and I think that's what it is. I've spent a lot of time working with the city of South Jordan, Riverton, and West Jordan, and those are the cities I've been representing. And now I get the opportunity to work with Sandy. And being there and listening to them and being engaged and involved. And that's what I've done. And that's what I did when I was on Jordan School Board as well. We healed a lot of rifts and came together to create some really good collaborative efforts. And I think it's time, it's engaging, it's listening, it's being willing to listen to the other side, it's being willing to negotiate. And negotiation doesn't mean that you give up your principle. It just means that you listen and you find common ground. And I think I'm actually had a lot of experience with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Keeping in line with kind of this positive theme that we're ending the debate with, you both are fortunate enough to have served in the state legislature. Susan, I'm going to start with you and then go to Rich. What is one piece of legislation that you've supported that you feel most proud of?
Okay, I'm going to talk about what I did here. And because it goes along with what we were just talking about, I began to realize the problem we have in childcare. And it's a big problem. And we do not have the capacity to meet the needs in our state. And same thing is true nationally. And there's a lot of ways you can solve this, but I wanted to find a solution that will empower our local health childcare providers as small business owners, and yet find great opportunities that are affordable for parents and that they can feel good about. Well, we brought the whole community together, the whole childcare community, the childcare centers, the childcare in-home, and the unlicensed, as well as the State Department, as well as several very interested stakeholders. And we talked it through, and we talked about different options. We came together on something that was comprehensive, and I'm really excited, and so many people are excited to think this is going to help our childcare problem. So I'm super excited about it.
Rich, same question for you. In your time in the legislature, what are you most proud of?
You know, one, serving the great people in the state of Utah and the people in House District 50 was probably one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever done. But I will tell you that probably the key legislation was the Sitla Trust Fund. It was a $2 billion fund that then previous Speaker Becky Lockhart asked me to be on the committee. We ran the legislation that secured the state funding of a $2 billion trust fund that's now grown to about $2.7 billion. I'm not sure where with the market, the last little bit, but that money that comes off of that revenue goes directly into the classrooms, that parents with their local principals get the opportunity to decide how that money is spent. $500,000 to Bingham High School, $150,000 to an elementary school, and how that can change what goes on in the classroom to give teachers more resources with the parents being involved, and to secure that funding, in my opinion, is a dramatic legacy going forward, is securing the Sitla Trust Fund money for generations to come.
Thanks, Rich. And then staying on you, Rich, a minute for your closing statements.
You know what? I will tell you, winning and being a successful leader is 98% listening to constituents, because it's not about passing legislation that Rich is doing or Susan is doing or Dan McKay or, even the speaker, Brad Wilson. It is about what we are doing as a leader to listen to our constituents. What do they need? How can we help them? How can we help our local leaders? How can we help our community? And my number one goal is to make sure that I help secure every dollar I can for House District 45 that has gone up to the Capitol in the state budget comes back to us. I know we're going to win this. I am pumped and excited to be part of the future, because you can either be the victim of the past or an architect of the future. I believe I will be the architect of the future for House District 45 as we move forward in the state of Utah. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, your closing statement.
Oh, thank you. I really agree with Rich on that. Serving your constituents is the biggest thing that you do, and it is the best thing that you do. And I work really hard to identify constituents and listen to them and work together with them. And I think many of my constituents would agree that I'm a great listening ear, as well as cities and so on. There are three things that I'm really excited about in the next year. One is increasing my work on childcare, because we have done some really great things, but we're not done. And there's more we need to do to make sure we really address this problem that affects so many families. Number two, I want to get rid of Social Security state income tax, because that money's already been taxed. We shouldn't have it. We've made significant progress the last couple of years. We need to finish the job. And number three, working with education. I want to help give parents more voice and more opportunities in helping their children in their education. And I'm excited to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Rich. Thank you both for letting us dive a little bit more into some of these lightning round questions and for a really enlightening discussion. For our viewers, as a reminder, the primary for the nomination is June 28th on Tuesday. You can submit your mail-in ballot by that time, or show up that same day, or early voting, depending on your local precinct, to make sure to vote early. So thank you all so much, and thank you both again for a great discussion. So now, as we transition to our third and final debate of the evening, I was going to say night, but the sun's still up because it's the middle of June. It's pretty nice. Let's see if we can get that corner box removed from the last debate. But welcome, Jeff and Carolyn. Thank you for your patience as we start just a couple minutes late. Again, for our viewers, now we're moving to House District 46. These two joined us a few weeks prior for that two simultaneous debates going on, and we're excited to be able to give them each more of an individual one-on-one debate. So again, we have Carolyn Phippen and Jeff Steinquist joining us. Thank you both so much. We're going to jump in, and some of the questions will be similar to what you both received a few weeks ago, and we're going to change it up for the last 10 minutes and have them be, we're having some technical on Carolyn. Let me know if you can start hearing me as I'll keep giving some explanation to our audience. Can you hear us right now, Carolyn, or no? Or can you unmute and try and talk and see if we can hear you? Jeff, we can hear you all right?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Let's see. You unmute and talk. Your sound's not coming in either. Marcy, should we have her sign off and sign on, or? Okay, there we go.
Oh, she's jumping, yeah.
Maybe to jump in, I don't think it'll necessarily ruin Carolyn's flow. Could we start with our opening statement by Jeff in the interim, or should we wait?
I think she knows the format, so she would expect that we're going to jump into opening statements. We'll just start with Jeff.
Cool.
But then if she's not back in 2 minutes, we will need to delay and make sure we give her an opportunity.
Okay. Zoom debates. The future is now. Jeff, opening statements for you as our current incumbent.
Sure, yeah, and I'm happy to defer to whatever you want me to do. Oh, looks like she's back. I don't know if we can hear it.
Yep, got it now.
Okay, awesome, Carolyn. Thank you. We're going to have Jeff start off with his opening statement of 2 minutes and then have you follow up.
All right, hello. I'm Jeff Stenquist, and I've served in the legislature for the past 4 years. I've lived here in this area for more than 25 years with my wife Karen and our 4 kids. Been raising them here. Serving in the legislature is a part-time, it's not a full-time job, it's part-time service for me. My full-time career is in software, so I have a lot of knowledge and experience with technology as well. So I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this and listen to what we have to say. And I look forward to talking about all the work that I've been doing in the legislature to represent our area for the years that I've served. Utah is ranked at or near #1 in just about every category, and for good reason. We have the best performing economy coming out of the pandemic, low unemployment, highest opportunity for upward mobility. It really is a place where businesses and families can thrive. I really do believe that the reason for that is because we focus on sound conservative principles, but we also listen and understand different aspects, different points of view on an issue, so that we can come up with the best policy and the best solutions on a given issue. And so that's what I've really been trying to do and fighting for during my time in the legislature and serving. And I think that really is Utah. The secret that Utah has is to coming up with those solutions and making sure that we're avoiding unintended consequences and really coming up with the best policy, rather than getting into partisan bickering and those kinds of things. We really do live in a beautiful area. We're very lucky and blessed to live here, and we live in the best state in the country, I believe. And it's always been an honor for me to serve my neighbors for the time that I've been serving in the legislature. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Carolyn, your opening statements.
Hey, thank you. I'm Carolyn Phippen. As has been said, I'm running for Utah House 46. I won 63% at convention, and I believe that is because this district is looking for a strong conservative voice in the state legislature. I think many of us have noticed in recent years that conservatism is a term that often is used without so much the buy-in to the principles that are contained within that. And compromise, while it's good and necessary and healthy within certain restrictions or within a certain framework, can also lead us to a place that is not where we want to be when we compromise our principles. I've worked in politics in Utah over the last decade, and it's become increasingly clear that the middle may be comfortable, but it isn't the place where Utah can remain. We are one of the best managed states in the nation. And we're seeing now, though, that there are forces that are assaulting our state and assaulting our nation that a few short years ago, most of us could not have even imagined. And we're starting to see those consequences these past couple of years under the COVID regime. And as parents were exposed to things that were going on in the schools and the overreach of government, both federal, state, and local in our lives. And as I worked for Speaker Hughes and Senator Mike Lee, I learned that unlike the two of them, too many elected officials simply fail to grasp the reality of what's going on around us. And that is something that we must have at this time in our elected officials. There's nothing ordinary about the times that we're in, and that's become increasingly evident. And while it's great to be go along to get along placeholder Republican in the Utah State Legislature, that will not lead us to the place we need to be in the future. I'm sure that the deck chairs on the Titanic were very nicely arranged, but truly good management is no substitute for leadership. And we really need in this state good leadership going forward. And I plan to bring that to the Utah Legislature.
Thank you. Staying with you. Again, another 2-minute question. Perhaps no topic in Utah, and specifically Salt Lake County, is brought up more frequently in campaigns than growth and those growing pains we're experiencing because of our population. Namely, the question I have is, what specific legislation or policies do you support to address these growing pains, specifically as it pertains to transportation, housing, and general infrastructure?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a place for state government, obviously, when it comes to infrastructure. I also would say that we need to be very careful about thinking that it is the role of the state legislature to get involved in local land use authority and local planning beyond oftentimes a coordination between cities. I know a number of years ago, as Utah County was seeing a lot of growth, Utah and Salt Lake County, this area where those two counties meet, that there were cities who were planning and there wasn't adequate there weren't adequate conversations between them and coordination between the cities. And so you had major arteries that apparently did not meet up, right? And so we don't want to see those kinds of things. And we need an overall strategic plan, which this state is pretty good at. When it comes to, although sometimes there are hiccups like that, when it comes to ensuring that the state is looking at the infrastructure needs, appropriately funding the infrastructure needs. But this last session, we had the state pulling back a lot of land use authority from places where it has always and traditionally been housed, and that's with local authorities, and saying that as a result of a housing crisis, we need to have more high density, which, by the way, is often called affordable housing, but seldom is actually affordable housing. But it is high density. We can say that with certainty. But pulling back the ability of cities to block some high density development in areas where surrounding landowners had the expectation that there would not be such high density. Local officials did not want to see that there, and the state decided that they're going to take away some of that authority. We need to ensure that those types of decisions that, as I've mentioned, have historically been the role and been delegated to local governments remain in local government hands and among the community members.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jeff, same question to you.
Yeah, definitely growth is a major topic, and there are a lot of things that fall underneath growth. It's providing water, road infrastructure. Housing is definitely something that is top of mind for a lot of people right now. And speaking of local government, it is local governments that do a lot of the planning. And I spent 12 years on the Draper City Council planning the growth for Draper during a period where Draper was really experiencing its largest growth spurt ever. And so the challenge is, the growth comes, but it's making sure that we continue to keep, Draper a fantastic place, and Utah a fantastic place as we grow. And I think that the city of Draper's done a great job of that. Bluffdale's experiencing that as well. And so I think that it is important for local governments to have that authority to understand how they, how their community should be growing. But then the state needs to be able to support that. And we do have regional planning with the Wasatch Front Regional Council, the Mountain Land Association of Governments, and other regional planning authorities that help coordinate that growth model, at least on that's on the transportation side and other areas, to make sure that we're managing the growth in a responsible way and getting input from our residents in terms of how those different communities want to grow and what character they want to have.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
As a reminder to our viewers, you can also submit questions during this debate, and for the last 5 minutes, we'll take time addressing those questions. So just as a reminder to our viewers. Our next question pertains to Utah families. Both the pandemic and recent social issues have brought to the forefront of how to not only protect Utah families, but strengthen them. So Jeff, staying with you, 2 minutes on this one. What legislation or policies should we support that would help protect Utah families?
Yeah, certainly. I think that it's so crucial that we support our families. Families are the foundation of our society. And as we see that, breakdown in family structures, that's when people start to rely more on government. And that is the wrong direction that we want to go. We want to be able to empower families to make decisions for themselves without government intervention. And one of the things that I've done, for example, I've supported legislation to protect the unborn. I've supported legislation to help, provide, restore the tax credits for children and make sure that families aren't being overly taxed because they have, because they're supporting their children. One of the pieces of legislation and an issue that I've pushed for strongly in the legislature related to families is is creating better awareness and education about the dangers of drinking alcohol during pregnancy, since that creates lifelong learning disabilities that are 100% preventable and will save the state money down the road in social services and law enforcement. And so there are lots of different ways that really the state needs to stay out of people's lives as much as possible and just be supportive of families and people wanting to raise their children. And I think in Utah, we do a fantastic job with that, and we need to continue to keep that as a focus.
Thank you, Jeff. Carolyn, same question to you.
I would say the number one thing that the state can do to help the formation, not only the formation, but the continuation of strong families in this state is going back to Utah law that provides that parents retain, and I'm quoting here, retain the fundamental right and duty to exercise primary control over the education of their children. We currently have an education system that is very directed from Washington, D.C., because the state has chosen, like every other state, let's be honest, with, I think, maybe a lack of recognition at the time of what that would mean as far as federal tentacles in our schools. The states have chosen, including Utah, to take money from the federal government, which I've heard differing numbers. Between 4 and 9% is all it is that we take in education dollars. My guess is that our compliance costs are higher than the percentage of money that we take or the amount of money that we take. But we lose what is contained within Utah law and guaranteed within Utah law and meant to be respected, which is the right of parents to exercise primary control over the education of their children. And when we see some of the things that we've seen recently, and I'll tell you, we have teachers who are operating under a massive burden from this federal regime. And so they're feeling pressure from every direction, including the pressure that comes from parents who are upset with some of the curriculum that has come as a result of interference by the state legislature and by the federal government. And too much has been taken out of the hands of parents and local communities as far as how those children should be taught, and there never should be interference by a public education system in the moral teachings of a family to their children. And that would be, in my book, the number one thing the state can do, make some changes there.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn, we're going to stick with you to go first on this next question regarding public health. Obviously, a very common topic that's discussed in these last couple of years. And as we transition away from a pandemic living, what role or what actions should the state do moving forward as it comes to public health? I guess another way to word that question is, what role does the state have in public health moving forward?
Okay, I would say the state, there's an education component that comes with the state. I am very concerned. We probably ought to re-examine, and I know the legislature has done some of this already. I think we need to dig in and make sure there aren't any remnants, and that is re-examine the ability, especially of the executive branch, to continually re-up and renew executive orders, emergency orders that were meant to be to enable the addressing of imminent threat, 30 days or less, in order to give the legislative branch at whatever level time to meet and make decisions. We had overreach by the executive branch at every level, all the way from local communities up to the federal government. We saw it over these past 2 years, and we saw emergency declarations in the state of Utah that were meant to be for 30 days, explicitly for 30 days, continuously renewed, so that the powers that those that were granted with those emergency orders would continue. We cannot have that. That is a massive violation in so many ways of separation of powers. And we saw things that, even if you think that the end result was good or what you wanted, once we start violating the system that was set up to protect us from government overreach, then we are just heading down a path where government can overreach in a whole lot of other ways that we wouldn't like. And just remember, we have a president who has declared, without officially declaring, a climate emergency. There are a whole lot of powers that could come with that would massively influence the way we would live. And if we had executive branch officials here who chose to follow suit and would continuously renew that, we'd be in trouble. So when it comes to health, let's let them educate, and let's let them go back to their traditional roles, and let's limit the emergency powers that violate our rights.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, it was very interesting having served in the legislature throughout the pandemic from beginning to end. And we had, I think in 2020, we had 6 special sessions that year. And a lot of the discussion was around this very question about what type of powers should the executive branch have? What powers should local governments have? The legislature is the ultimate policymaking body for the state. The powers given to local health departments and the executive branch are granted by the legislature, but the legislature doesn't meet very often. It's a large body and it doesn't move. It's designed to not move very fast. And so it's finding that right balance between, what guardrails we need to put in place. And honestly, our emergency statutes were built around things like earthquakes and fires that are sudden and fast and maybe are over sooner versus a long running, 1.5 to 2 year pandemic. And so there were a lot of changes that we had to make to make adjustments, but it really is the responsibility of the legislature to make sure the proper guardrails are in place, to make sure that there's not abuse and overreach by other entities in the powers that they've been given.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
We're going to move into our speed round questions. So you each get a minute to answer these ones. First one, and this is one you both received a few weeks ago regarding election integrity. This is a hot topic that's been discussed since the 2020 presidential election. Where would you evaluate current election laws in Utah, and what changes, if any, do you think need to be implemented? Jeff, we'll start with you.
So elections in Utah are conducted by our county clerks, and with some oversight from the state elections office and of course the legislature that sets policy. I think that our county clerks are professionals and they do a really good job. Just yesterday, in fact, I'm on an interim committee. We were talking more about what types of things should we do this year that we, in addition to what we did last year, to help improve election security, election transparency. We passed, I think, 4 or 5 different bills last year related to this. One of them, for example, is to put cameras on election ballot boxes so that there's visibility as people are dropping out ballots. One of the things we talked about just yesterday in our committee was how do we determine what's the best way to determine residency? Because you might have people that have second homes, and what's the right way to determine what that residency might be for voting purposes. So there's lots of things that need to be looked at and that we're continue to look at in terms of making incremental improvements to our election security and accuracy.
Carolyn?
Yeah, so on this, as was already mentioned, there were some good strides that were made last year. There were other fixes that some felt were necessary that didn't make it. And so, for me, as I come in fact, I just had a discussion with some people today, actually, for my day job about this very issue. What do we need to be looking at as a state? And it's some people who've looked into some of the elections and in Utah and some of the concerns that do exist. Gowd has talked about some of this, where we know that in Salt Lake County, we have somewhere between, somewhere between 12,000 and 14,000 and 32,000 ballots that nobody can explain where they came from. There may be an absolutely perfectly legitimate explanation for those, but the county clerk's office has refused to answer any questions and address the issue. We need to have transparency that enables people to feel secure in our elections, or we are going to see greater societal problems if
Mhm.
people feel like their voice is not being heard and respected and they don't have confidence in the process.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn, sticking with you for this next minute question, and this will be the question for both of you. If you are elected or reelected, what would your priority legislation be in the next legislative session that you would be pushing?
Yeah, for me, it would be addressing ESG. That's something that this past legislative session, I will say, most of our state legislators, and like most people in the United States, were very unaware of this threat. I was working on it for my job earlier this year, and Representative Cheryl Acton had a bill that would address it, as did another representative, Ship, I think it was, that would have addressed a piece of it. Neither one of those bills was able to pass. And I think that there are some things, I was just with a working group of state legislators from around the country last month, where we were looking at proposed language and some solutions. Because look, if I'm in the legislature or not, I expect to be there, but even if I'm not, this is still my top priority, is ensuring that we don't have a complete really decimation of a free market system because of manipulation of the big players who are driving a political agenda through our free market system. We cannot have that happen.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jeff, same for you.
You know, probably the top thing that I would do is some follow-up legislation. So I passed some legislation this past year that was very significant, that provides additional oversight on financial transactions and financial debt by UTA, the Inland Port, Point of the Mountain Authority, and the military MITA, Military Land Use Authority. And I worked very closely with the State Treasurer Marlo Oakes on that legislation. In fact, we were meeting almost daily on that legislation. And as a matter of fact, during that discussion, so there are some follow-up things to expand that oversight. I think that certain debt transactions by universities and other types of government entities also should have some review in certain cases. And so I plan on working with Treasurer Oakes on that. And we've also talked about working on ESG legislation. Going back to even last year, we were talking about it. That and in addition, that's to continue some of the work that I've done on outdoor recreation as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Sticking with you for another minute question before, this will be the final question before we get to closing statements. There's a lot of contention in our political system, in our media at a national level, and to a degree at a state level. What would your approach be in helping heal political subdivisions here in Utah and making sure Utah doesn't follow this national trend that we're seeing?
You know, that's a really good question. And I think that really the root of the problem is when we see, you know, people going to extremes, maybe on the other side of the political spectrum from where we are, there's a knee-jerk reaction to go even further on, you know, on the other side. And I think that that's the wrong reaction. I think that we need to stick with common sense, practical solutions to the issues that we face. And I think that that's the key to keeping everyone coming together. We need to come together and not vilify people that we may disagree with. We need to find that common ground and those common sense solutions, because if we continue to push to the extremes, the winner of that, you know, especially among Republicans, if we're fighting amongst Republicans and having this more Republican than now attitude and fight between ourselves as a party, the winner of that fight is the Democrats. We need to keep the mainstream people together by coming up with common sense solutions like we've done in the past.
Thanks, Jeff. Carolyn, your thoughts?
Yeah, we do, as was just said, need to be willing to find common ground. If we remember, the Constitution was the long negotiated middle ground. I do have concerns when I start to hear members of my own party talk about constitutional governance as an extreme. And I would say, I had somebody with a different vision once in some work that I was doing say, we need to all be on the same page on this issue. I said, you're absolutely right. I'm standing on the Constitution. If you are willing to join me on the Constitution, we can find a solution. But too often we as Republicans say, oh, we just want to find a solution. And we believe that, it's good for us to work together, which we do. But you've got to be standing on the Constitution with me. And I am willing to work with anybody who is willing to recognize that, again, was the negotiation. And it seems like ever since we got the Constitution, all negotiations have only led us away from it. If I'm standing on it, I am not the extreme one.
Thank you, Carolyn. Pivoting now to our closing statements. Jeff, we're going to start with you, and this will be a 90-second closing statement on why the voters should be voting for you.
Great, thank you. So for the past 4 years, it's been an honor to serve. And I really have worked hard to listen to my constituents and understand what issues are important to us in this part of the state and what's important to our state as a whole. I've defended conservative values and fought for those common sense solutions. And the result of the policies that we have come up with and worked toward in the legislature, and sometimes there are harsh disagreements and different ideas being thrown around, but ultimately, if we can come to the right policy, it really is for the benefit of everyone in our state. I have a conservative voting record. It's not just, I'm not just paying lip service. I've proven that I've defended these, our conservative values and stood up for the things that really have made our state so successful. At the same time, I listen to my constituents, I respond to my emails, I answer my phone, and it's great to listen to all the different ideas that people have. I've run the legislation that constituents have brought to me and have been successful with. And so it's really being accessible to my constituents and listening and coming up with those common sense solutions. I have the experience now. And with 4 years on my belt, I have the opportunity to take on more leadership roles and be even more effective for our area. So I ask for your vote. My name is Jeff Stenquist. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Carolyn, 90 seconds.
Okay. As I mentioned, I've worked with the Utah State Legislature for almost 10 years, first with Speaker Hughes and then representing Senator Mike Lee in the state and with elected officials in the state. I've worked on many pieces of legislation. And so experience is no issue there. And as I've said, management is no substitute for leadership. We seem to think that it's enough. It just is not anymore. It was for a time because of the work that those who came before us did for many, many years. This district is used to strong, dynamic, powerful leaders. It's time to return to that type of representation. Somebody who is committed to not only vote the right way, but do the hard work behind the scenes, to bring other people along, to talk to colleagues and help them understand why what's right is what's right, and they should support it as well. When I'm elected, you can count on me to be guided by the principles of conservative action, not just conservative thought. I'm a Republican for real, and I will lead for real. My name is Carolyn Phippen, and I'm running for House District 46.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate the discussion. Again, to our viewers, this was our third and final debate of the evening. It's still the evening, the sun is not down yet. So thank you both again. As a reminder, and to you both as candidates, you can go on the YouTube channel and check which questions were asked. And if any questions were submitted, you can respond directly to those constituents. Please make sure to go out and vote. The primary is Tuesday, June 28th. You should have already received your mail-in ballot, which you can submit up to the day of the election or show up early or in person to vote. Again, thank you all so much. I'm Mackie Smith here with Marcy Hausman. We have Chris Knoll's beautiful face in the bottom right corner. He is our county party chair, and we're appreciative of him of helping us set up this technical abilities to do this via Zoom. Marcy, any closing statements by you for our viewers and our two final candidates?
No, just appreciation candidates, all of the candidates who've joined us tonight. I too am an elected official on the Sandy City Council, so I know the grit and perseverance it takes to run a campaign, and I appreciate all that you are doing to get the word out and to connect with voters. And thank you to our voters who've joined us tonight as well. We appreciate each of you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
Night.
Okay, I'm going to shut down the stream.
Okay, if we have to.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, have a good night, everybody.